If you're an athlete, you know the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
So, and I'm working on it, and also the game is teaching me things. The game itself is teaching me things. I call the game a demon. I summoned it, and then it fucking told me shit, right? So, I'm having these experiences with saying this game is teaching me more than I'm designing it, and then I found myself actually able to do pulp sorcery. Sorcery.
You may need to listen to this interview more than once to absorb it all. Ron was often in the room when it happened, and his memory and perspective of the first 40-plus years of the role-playing hobby is astounding. He founded The Forge, where many of our guests and indie creators flourished, shared ideas, and together changed the course of the hobby. Ron first coined the concept of lines and veils in his game Sorcerer, and he lays claim to the term actual play. We cover the earliest years of role-playing in a way that hasn't happened before on this show. Ron steps us through the mechanics and the evolution of role-playing games. You'll hear why, for some, Ron is a controversial figure in the hobby, and for others, someone that has always looked at games and how we play differently. Now, for me, he was a great guest who didn't hold back and packed every minute of this interview with insights in the industry and how we play. My good friend Sean from Gaming and BS saved this episode. The audio quality was garbage, but his audio magic brought it back from the dead. Thanks, Sean. And also thank you to our newest patrons, Fabian Picart, Sam Ius, Peter Thomas, William Payne, Isaac Turton, Aid S, and Eli Greason. Because of you and the other 100-plus patrons, I continue to put out content weekly. Okay, sit back, relax, and enjoy my time with Ron.
Do you love to unplug and play games around the table? Greetings, friends and floorheads, to Tabletop Talk from Third Floor Wars. If you love tabletop gaming, you are in the right place. Listen as Craig delivers in-depth discussions and interviews with game designers, creators, insiders, and experts. Learn from the people making and playing the role-playing, miniature, and board games you love.
Howdy friends, Craig here. Today we're talking to one of the most prominent names in the indie RPG world, Ron Edwards. Now, Ron is known for the Sorcerer RPG, The Forge, and most recently Adept Play. Many consider him one of the early pioneers of the indie scene. So Ron, you have been mentioned on several of my interviews. It's nice to finally have you on, and welcome to the Third Floor.
Thank you very much, Craig. Pleasure to be here. Those are my orotund tones of required internet discourse. So that's it. That's all you get. From the rest, I talk normal.
That sounds great. So the one thing I'm always curious about, Ron, before we jump into, how just the games and stuff like that, is that at some point you were just a player. At some point before that, you didn't know anything about this. So if you can kind of give us a little bit of your origin story, when did you discover you could roll dice and pretend to be other people?
1978. This was the era of Holmes, the first box set. Well, wait, the first really commercially available Dungeons and Dragons. And then also the era of Melee and Wizard from what was then Metagaming, and a few other games kicking around that were very difficult to find or see depending on where you were. So whether you knew about Tunnels and Trolls, Chivalry and Sorcery, or Traveler, which was just popped up about that point, just before then, and then certainly Empire of the Petal Throne. If you knew about these, you were pretty damn broad, because there were no game stores. Games had not folded into comic book stores. There was scattershot availability in hobby stores, which at the time were mainly about airplane glue and military miniatures. So anyway, just to get you back on to get us back on track, that's when I started role playing.
And how was it introduced to you, Ron? So was it something you just came across? Was it a friend?
There is a very important piece of this whole puzzle that I'm just an example of. For some reason, and I believe it was in 1976, I don't have the exact reference in front of me, but for some reason, the syndicated press services, whether it was Associated Press or whatever, I don't know, but something like that, right? Something where everybody draws articles from nationally, included an article that someone had written locally, I suspect from Lake Geneva or somewhere like it, which was a glowing, or at least, holy shit, look what these weirdos are doing, some sort of puff piece, basically. And it was all about Dungeons and Dragons. So it was this article, which then got printed all over the country. That's what synonymized the word Dungeons and Dragons with role-playing.
Right.
Culturally speaking, that's how it happened. And it's actually a big deal. We can't have this grassroots romance that this game appeared, everybody started playing this game, and then everybody sort of, I don't know, that, you know what I mean? The grassroots romance of commerce and play that just sort of blossomed in some sort of, I don't know, Milton Friedmanite romance of, merit. Okay.
Sure.
But it's why a lot of the other games you only found out about highly personally. I would never have found out about Melee if the same kid in my junior high school that I started playing D&D with. And you see, that's the thing. You started playing with 3 or 4 people in different contexts.
Right.
And that's kind of how I got my copy of Holmes. I'm not even sure if I even had the box. I think all I got was the blue book. Sometimes they sold the blue book all by itself. That's another thing. Yeah, it's really impossible to tell what's official or not. I've come across references to it being sold independently. I think that I never saw the other boxed materials in my friend's possession before he gave me that blue book. But anyway, so this other kid, he had Melee. Anyway, see what I mean? It's all this kind of diffuse thing. And I think that's what was going on that next summer. A group of adults for one of the community semi-camp activity, activities, did a D&D game. And that's when the Player's Handbook had just come out in 1978. And so therefore I was in that. But you see a bunch of us then, it was like you sat down, there's this kid you hadn't seen for 5 years, and you're like, oh, you do this D&D thing? It's like, yeah. So anyway, but that's very much the context.
Right.
This is going way too long, but
this is good.
So just to let you know, this is a little speech I make. Dungeons and Dragons in particular was shockingly unconstructed. You had the Holmes game had come out in 77, and it proceeded through for at least 4 years of reprint, up to and probably including the publication date of Moldvay, its successor. So that's coming along. And that was the thing you mainly found actually in any store that sold this stuff, if you were looking for D&D. At the same time, 1977 was published the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. And the scuttlebutt was that this Holmes game was going to take you through levels 1 through 3, and then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, when it came out, you would graduate and start with level 4 and keep going. That was sort of the talk at the time. The word basic D&D is not this game. Only later with Moldvay did they start making that part of a title or a set. It said like the basic role-playing game or something like in a blurb on the cover, but it's called Dungeons and Dragons. So anyway, there was that. But then that means that you also, if you went into Walden Books, now this was amazing. D&D in a book, knock, right? A book is in a bookstore right there next to the Son of Origins of Marvel Comics by Stan Lee. I mean, holy shit, it's a book. So, but everybody was advanced. I'm advanced.
Now it's serious.
And so, this monster manual. And as you know, the player handbook came out and D&M's guide came out in succession year after year after that. All of this is in the context of Dragon Magazine, which had begun almost right away. And it was very much an indicator of how D&D you were, how many Dragon Magazine issues you had and how much you read.
That was your cred.
Well, yeah, except that I didn't have any. I think I had read one article, and I didn't really care. I really liked Melee and then Wizard came out in 1978, and Wizard was just the shit. I mean, it was these two tiny little pamphlets.
Yeah, fantastic. What was it, Ron? What was it about Melee and Wizard that really tuned you versus just the basic D&D?
First of all, you should know that the moment-by-moment combat round options and mechanics of Melee sunk so deeply into role-playing that you know those rules. You just don't. You may not know that they are those rules, but you know them. Anytime you're okay, this is my square or this is my hex, this is my facing. On my turn, I can go half a move and attack. I can shift to a defensive stance. I've got this much to do. I'm going to shift to this, after I can attack and then I can scoot this much, stuff like any of it.
Yeah.
It's all Melee.
Interesting.
So Champions, GURPS, 3rd edition D&D, 4th edition D&D, 5th edition D&D, all of that is not from D&D. So that was one thing. It also had personal dexterity-based attacks and armor that blocked it. RuneQuest would have that too in a moment. RuneQuest coming out, the first sort of lightning strike of RuneQuest in 1978, although very difficult to get, and became much easier to get in the next few years. But that has its own combat system, but it also has that very personal fighting aspect, sort of shooter view fighting.
Right.
And then Wizard did the same thing with bodily powered magic. You were using your strength with a personal array of spells that were based on your intelligence. And they were both dueling games, but they were very much preparatory to a role-playing game which came out in 1980 called In the Labyrinth. All of this was collectively called the Fantasy Trip.
Got it.
So
got it.
But they were they, in my opinion, spoke very well to somebody. They had great color text that was very much about your character's own motivations. Nothing in the game had anything to do with that, but the color text was awesome for this. And so, I mean, if you even say the names of these characters in the right company, people drop their stuff and start enthusiastically talking. So, so what I'm saying is that those sunk in hard for me. You may also not know. I don't mean to patronize you. You were a long-time role player, so I guess I should stop saying that.
No, but a lot of people that are listening aren't, Ron, so you're fine.
Which is that in around 1980, you may be surprised, collective world out there, or maybe not, that, frankly, fantasy fandom and fiction didn't like role-playing very much.
Oh, I did not know that.
Right, and you would be, it's in retrospect, we know Robert Aspirin, Stephen Brust, Will and Emma Shetterly, and a number of other people, Roger Zelazny, were all avid role players. And if you look at their fiction, you can see it penetrate into their fiction at that time. But the effects that would come later with Dragonlance, and as Dragonlance, started really rolling, and as more explicit versions of this appeared, so that you knew you were reading a role-playing game in novel form, or that if you played this role-playing game that, it was about this novel, right? All of that would be very, very strong within about 6 or 7, 10 years, but not yet. And it was interesting to talk to science fiction and fantasy pros who basically said, they basically just thought of it as a very shitty form of fanfic for quantitatively obsessed people, for exactly the kind of fans they disliked the most. The ones who would, grab their forearms and say, but really, who's stronger, this guy or that guy, and stuff like that. And they just the writers hate that shit. And so it was kind of a troubled scene. This was before LARPing was big, before furries. If you can imagine the opinion of LARPer furries in like the bigger hobby,
right?
That's what gamers of any kind were to the fiction.
Isn't that something?
So the eventual, basically the rest of us got old and the older ones died off, I guess, and so so that changed. But at the time it was. I mean, and also I'll be blunt. D&D as such, despite, I think, several dedicated individual efforts, particularly certain artists, but it just wasn't catching in terms of scratching one's fantasy itch. The tournament scene, which defined so much of its mechanics as they developed, was repugnant to a lot of people who loved fantasy fiction, and so they weren't interested. And so you would get one of these tournament-based scenarios and you would say, all right, forget all that. Now, who are these characters and why are they doing what they're doing? And then you would retool it into a more dynamic thing when you played it. But by the time I was in college, most of us had stopped role-playing, mainly because we found it not to be. This is before the Satanic Panic. I'm Gen X. We didn't give a shit about Satanic Panic. We didn't give a shit about Say No to Drugs, right? All that's for you later, younger people. We didn't give a shit about any of that. So so to us, that didn't bug us. I mean, we were too old for the Satanic Panic. Who cares what your parents think? But but most of us had left role playing. I only came back to it. I mean, I did sort of scattershot attempts with a number of things, particularly like Stormbringer and a couple of other things that I was trying to find sort of the linchpin of the literary kind of, I needed it connected to what I liked in the fiction, with, I was deeply into Howard and Clark Ashton Smith and stuff like that. And I was not into the derived Conan at all. No secondary authors, no DeCamp, no Carter. I respected the Marvel comic book, which when Roy Thomas was doing it was really faithful to Howard.
It was good. Yeah.
But not the movie. I was an anti-Conan guy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's actually kind of a fun movie of a movie,
exactly.
But we're talking about why I'm here for fantasy. So I have a copy.
It doesn't come from the Howard region of France.
And so, and I exactly. And so I've got, a copy of The Hour of the Dragon in one hand, which at the time was published as Conan the Conqueror. And in my other hand, I've got a copy of Death's Master by Tanith Lee, which is this wonderful psychedelic sex-filled demonic romp, right? And those, I've got one in each hand, and I'm like, I'll role play, but this
is what we're doing.
This is what I'm here for. And it wasn't working. So Champions brought me in. That's
where I was headed. So, and as I've gone through and talked to a lot of people about their origin stories, that's about a lot of similarities, and, taking that break from college. And it sounds like you were headed towards Champions bringing you back, but did you miss it? Or was it just Champions finally scratched an itch?
No, I always had my antenna up. The number of people that I knew, and particularly people who had a wide variety of lifestyles and interests, all of us kind of had one antenna up. We had shown up at like the campus role-playing club once and kind of looked around and like, not really for me. But we had done it, right? A lot of us, and this also was a time when and this lasted a long time. I bet you remember it well, is that whole thing of people just not wanting to admit it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, it was very closeted. You'd talk very about it and everybody would kind of like do this and sort of shy away from you. And then one of the people involved who is there, they'll sidle up to you later. Like, hey, hey, you were into that? You were into that?
You felt like you had to have a password.
Right. Yeah. So so we outed ourselves. That was a big thing for my campus group, my college groups. And then the playing that I did after that, which was basically after that, from 1986 on nonstop, just nonstop. And I brought it wherever I went. And I even put like ads out in student papers and stuff when I moved somewhere else. And I was just like, okay, tits out, role playing. This is fun. No shame. This is not a secret. It's not a vice. And this is kind of a big deal for me, right? This is an activity and it has merit. So anyway, without going into all the details, Champions brought me back. And that was my primary game for many years, although I played many others. We played Rollmaster, Cyberpunk, tons and tons of stuff.
Yeah.
I will say that one thing you said a little earlier made me say, I better get back to that before I forget. Here's my thing. I think that being a role player is the primary identity and that I have not lost it. I have not changed. I have not moved out of that status from that into anything else. It is what I do. And inside that, I think some of us have a personality disorder.
Okay.
And that personality disorder says, I feel like designing some rules. And sometimes one doesn't even know one has it. And therefore, at the table, 5 years into your game with everybody, someone else sits down at the game, says, oh, we're playing this. They start playing. They're like, what the fuck are you playing here? Right? Exactly. And so you've done game design. You just, didn't know it. And that's cool, right? That's cool. Same thing if you have it in a Scritchy Scratch notebook, because a whole lot of you listening out there do. You would not believe how many of the cardboard shirt boxes from the 80s or old biology notebooks that you were supposed to be taking notes in and all that stuff have role-playing games in them that you wrote. So that's all going on, and sometimes they get played. And I think an amazing amount of creative intuition and authenticity goes into those. So that's why I consider that to be the healthy or at least manageable form of the personality disorder.
Right. So I'd be curious, Ron.
But wait, hold on a sec.
Oh, please.
Then there's the severe form of the personality disorder, which means for some reason unknown to anybody on this earth, you want to publish what you did.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but it is a severe condition and it needs management. It needs support. It needs, mitigation from others. It needs all the things that a condition of that sort needs. But that's what I'm trying to say. I'm a role player. I'm not anything else. If you deviate from that and you start to design and publish, goodbye. I'm done. You're out of my zone. I do not talk to people who don't play or who consider themselves, oh, I'm a designer now. It's like, okay, there's a pool in the back you can drown yourself in if you talk.
Yeah, I get that, right? I get that. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly.
Your turn.
Yeah, I was going to say, you see that in miniature gaming too. If I talk to people that say, I do game design, I create game design. Well, what do you play? And then nothing. It's just like, well, if you're not playing it, then I don't know why we're talking, because I completely understand what you're saying. So I'd be curious, as an adult, Ron looks back on those times, right, where you rediscovered, you fell in love with it, you left it, you come back to it with Champions, you identify yourself as a role player. As someone now looking backwards, what do you think was the early hooks? What was it that just got you in high school, allowed you to take some time away, but kept your radar going and had you come back, and then eventually would become a big part of your adult life as well? What do you think it was looking retrospectively? It's
extremely straightforward, and it's also completely integrated with some of the other topics that you're planning on asking me. It has to do with my thoughts on what we do as a medium. Now, that's a big deal, what I just said, that this activity is a medium. So one of the important things about a medium is that it can contain any content that the practitioner of the moment wants to put into it.
Right.
It also means as a medium that it can be, okay, maybe this is the wrong word, but distorted through particular procedures of use. Different people can punch the medium in particular ways that make somebody within the practitioners, I would say, oh, you're totally not like me. Not if you're using the medium like that.
Right.
But you see, really, we are using the same medium, even if the individual practitioners have a thing about how each other is doing it. But the medium itself is not uniform. It is shaped by its use in those particular people. And that medium is composed not of talking and not of hearing, but of listening. Listening is what matters, because when the medium is active, when you actually have the medium, like you can say, do we or don't we have a canvas? It's a very straightforward thing. If you're going to be a painter, you do or you don't have a freaking thing to paint on.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, this is the same thing with this. Unless people are listening, which means that they are incorporating what other people are saying and reincorporating it through how they're speaking, treating what has been done through play as a new now of the microsecond for what they put in. And it doesn't matter if what they imagine is absolutely synonymous. Of course it doesn't imagine. For you, the arched roof is, broad in this church and while we're playing this game. And for me over here, I'm imagining much higher arched roof. It's okay, right? But what we are saying is easily reincorporated by one another. That's the medium right there. And with that medium as something that you can do things in, it is, I think, the best analogy is not theater or radio. In fact, I think both of them are extraordinarily poor. The best analogy is music.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not really talking about sort of the romantic jam session where everybody's like strumming away, doing kind of the catwalking on the keyboards thing. But I'm also not talking about symphonic music that we have rehearsed for the performance. I'm not talking about that either. If anything, it's closer to the former, but I don't really want to over-analogize. What I'm really saying is that here we are using instrumentation. We are using instrumentation. And so anything that anyone ever talks about as system is instrumentation for how we know what to take in and be able to reincorporate.
Right.
That's what it is. So all of this is exciting to me. I mean, I responded to it as that medium. And every single time it became about us being taken through someone else's delivered experience, I bounced off it. And every single time it became about whatever genre, external genre, or internal gaming-oriented genre, because D&D became its own genre like that, right? Yep. Either one. I bounced off it. And any time that when you'd read a text and it was extraordinarily clear when portions of the text went in that direction, that the RPGA tradition of D&D became very paternalistic, very much shepherding people through the steps of the modules. That was first, they were tournament, challenges. Then they became these sort of walkthroughs. And a lot of people got trained in those. And so that sort of became the standard for what a module was supposed to be. And people learned, they don't learn from core books. People learn from modules. People learn from scenarios, period.
Yep.
So that effect really kept driving me away from fantasy. And I loathed a lot of the fantasy published in the late 80s too. I hated it. And I have never really been a dedicated fantasy reader, like what's out, what's new, ever since. Although I still read tons, but like right now, what am I reading? High Couch of Silystra by Janet Morris.
Very nice.
From the mid 70s.
Yeah.
I'm not totally retro. I mean, I'll read a good book, but it's always recommended. These days it's always recommended. So does this kind of giving you kind of an idea of what
it does.
Really grabbed me? It was the potential of being there in the medium. The instrumentation can contain immense constraints, like a dedicated setting or a dedicated set of instrumentation for just how we get through a combat or do a combat, or what happens when somebody, I'll just throw one at you, right? Your character is telling the bandit that we would all do better if you guys go and pick on someone else. How many role-playing games do you know where the instrumentation actually permits you to continue to use the reincorporation in good faith to know what happens? Not that many. So I'm not saying it all needs to be modeled with a reaction table or anything. I am saying that we need to know how to manage things that happen in play. Role-playing games historically developed weird blind spots for that. And play just kind of detours around them, or is end-waved through. A lot of role-playing historically falls into what I call the murk, when we're not sure how our instrumentation is supposed to, do what is happening, or where your character is relative to what is happening, and everybody starts to try to take over basically through volume or through humor or something, and it's kind of a dishonest way to manage the medium at that point. And so I've always been very into, well, that's weird, once we're in the middle of this combat, I am fine in terms of like whether I can get my axe thrown at that guy or not and when. But for some reason outside of combat, well, this is what I'm always asking people, right? Your friend role-playing is sick of you palavering with this bandit, and the other bandit, with the 4 other bandits standing there, the other bandit is annoying as hell, right? The GM's playing that bandit is just a huge pain in the ass. And your friend is like, freaking elf wizard, blah, 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 blah. Shut up. I throw my axe at that guy.
Right.
When we start the combat mechanics, is the axe in the air or not?
Right. Yeah.
So you see what I mean by murk? There's the weird patches of murk, in some cases, are so instantiated into play through the fact that people are just writing role-playing games based on the role-playing games that they know.
Right.
And there's lots of others too. But the thing was, I was beginning to understand, especially through playing Champions, I was beginning to understand what was and wasn't being done with the instrumentation.
Interesting.
And particularly because I didn't want to be front-loading plot. But I'm using comic books of a particular era as my model, and so is everybody else that I'm playing with. And we knew that we didn't want to just slavishly conform, to that. We wanted it to be emergent. And so, but it was very clear, okay, we're going to have these arcs that are based on character conflict. There was a brilliant Champions supplement that was released in the mid-late 80s, coming from the early days of Champions, was finally published. And it was absolutely brilliant about character conflict and its emergent events that were intuitively built on by the player reacting to what had happened. And that's what created story.
Wow.
And it's by Aaron Alston. It's called Strike Force, and it's a seminal text in role-playing. And so I was like, okay, this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is great. And of course, we made every imaginable mistake in the book.
Sure.
Trying to do this. And I could not, at the time, we're talking maybe 1991 now, trying to figure out why this time what seemed like exactly the right thing for the teen romance to blossom and then become fraught as, the NPC side of it, lost control and all that stuff was like so there, and it was awful. And the player hated my guts and was like, what the hell, but I'm scratching my head and going, but like 10 sessions ago, we had that whole sequence with these emotions and that going on. And it was, and I was just like in awe of what was exploding at the table. And we had this saga,
Yeah.
And what's the difference? How come? And so around this time is when also in the early 90s is when you're getting a lot of games coming out that are challenging systemic assumptions. It's sort of, this is stupid. I had an experience, and I don't know what people are going to think of this, but I had an experience at 27. I caught the chicken pox. I had never had it as a kid.
Wow.
And it turns out the vaccine just had become available and or had been invented, but was barely available. Right. So I missed the vaccine by like this much. And I had a heinous case of chickenpox. I don't know if you know what that means for an adult, but it was just awful. And so like leprosy, awful. And
wow.
So I was shattered for like a year. My health was completely.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, my health was completely broken. I was like a skeleton. So I'd spent a lot of that time like and I just finished my master's, right? So, I was kind of in this trough, right, of recovery of all kinds. And so I basically studied. I studied Amber. I studied Over the Edge. I studied Vampire. Now, reading is not good enough. I will be the first to tell you, role-playing, reading is not good enough. But at this time, I was in a position to soak up what was being said. I was interested in it as text. As this is an insight. All these people are my age, right? All of the people I'm talking about writing these things, they're all my age. And I knew that they were just other role players. And so all that you need to do was kind of soak up what you can of what they were saying, if I had to say what I think, what would I say? And then I wanted to play a lot of these things too. So that kind of put me into the frame of mind of saying, actually, we can work with this medium. We can, we can actually try to understand. We can do things we want to do. We can try the instrumentation, and it's okay. There's 1,000 things to try. Look at all the different variables. We've got games with 4 numbers, and we've got games with 400 numbers. Right. If we're talking about active in a given moment of play, 4 numbers active, maybe even down to 1 or 2 active at a given moment of play. Then over here, dozens and dozens. Does that mean anything? Actually, I started looking at the games going, I don't think that means anything. I just think we're talking about bigger Boolean sets, right? I mean, not for a lot of them. So let's start looking for when the sets are different. When it's not just subdivisions of the same sets. Let's start looking at things where the sets are different. I trained in multivariate statistics. I was really interested in principal components analysis, eigenvectors, if you know what those are. And so I was really into eigenvectors. And so I was really interested in how 1,000 different variables could produce multidimensional lines that go in different directions. And so I was interested. Are there eigenvectors of role-playing design? So, and therefore, yes, you could have this has a dice pool and this one has a dice pool, but they load with the other variables differently so that this game design effect goes this way, that game design effect goes the other way. So I was pretty well sort of conceptually prepared to start being very comparative about this. And I think anyway. And so That's when I started designing.
Interesting. Now, it sounds to me like the year of the Pox was a turning point for you. Then,
now that I think about it, I had designed a couple of things as knockoffs of Wizard before that, and I had already just begun to have the ideas. Of, listen, Ken St. Andre was on the right track with his demon summoning only magic. I want that. I want the spirit magic inside the shaman magic inside RuneQuest, which in the original RuneQuest, I like to make fun of it really because it's so cool. But the point is that you have this game that's it's fine grains, but only to a certain level the whole way through. And then you step into those rules and all of a sudden you're learning actually how to be a shaman. It's like really right. Like detailed in there. And that little sub game in there, I always said, you know what? That can be its own thing.
That's cool.
So I was thinking about all that stuff. That's what was on my mind. The year of the Pox, kind of was my recovery moment of putting this stuff together.
That's great. So guys, the Insider Insight series is my opportunity to sit down with designers, developers, artists, writers, creators, and learn about the approach to their work. And I try to understand their process, inspiration, and methods for crafting their creations. And that's what we're going to do next with Ron. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back from this break, we're going to talk about Ron picking up this disorder of design and putting together a little game called Sorcerer. We'll be right back.
You like science fiction, right? You love playing games, maybe even role-playing games. But what if you can't get your friends together for a game night? If you love games like Mothership or Orbital Blues, check out Deadbelt, a card-based space western solo strategy RPG about skillful and desperate scavengers picking over the remains of junked starships in hopes of a juicy payday. In it, you deal with lurking dangers, push your luck, and walk away with enough cred to keep on flying. Of course, you might get eaten by lurking aliens, or run afoul of rival scavengers, or face the murderous ghosts of long-dead spacers. No one said life in the Deadbelt was going to be easy. For more information on this and all of Sean and Abby Drake's games, swing over to acoupleofdrakes.com. The link's in the show notes.
So now that we have, let me start off by saying it's obvious, hopefully to you now, why I wanted to have Ron on the show. We've had a lot of people come on the show that talk about, how they approach their design of their game. And the thing that I wanted to do with Ron, which we've already started doing, is really getting a whole next level analysis of this. Ron, to a fault, might have spent more time thinking about this than any of us would have considered. And that's exciting to me. But let's go back in time, Ron. At some point, you mentioned you fiddled around with some designs. Do you consider Sorcerer kind of your first serious embark into design?
Well, the first sets that I started playing with kept coming back to the themes of, and they were mostly sword and sorcery, because at that time I was deeply unhappy with the absolute eclipse of pulp sword and sorcery. It has been revived as of about 2012. It has been revived. But before that, or before a few years before that, nobody knew what pulp sword and sorcery was like, except for highly specialized readers. And its revival in the 60s and 70s with its own properties. But all of that had been eclipsed by 80s fantasy. For most people, fantasy is the Belgariad and Forgotten Realms, period. And it was, and intertwined with fantasy role-playing in a way that was deeply mutually supportive and mutually deeply limiting. So that's fantasy. I read fantasy. That's what they read. So to be reading that stuff, to have the shelf that I had, was very isolated. And don't forget, pre-internet in any fashion that most of us would call the internet. It was just when I started in the PhD program, it was just beginning to roll, just beginning to get going, just beginning to, to sort of shape itself. So no Google, no PayPal, no platforms of any kind, just Usenets, right? And so at this time, I guess there's a few, to answer your question, yes, but.
Okay.
Because my first thing, like everybody, I think, or many people, is to take a system that is quite satisfying to you in many ways, and then you start yanking on pieces of it. And you may be interested to know that my first attempt was actually a hack of Cyberpunk.
Oh, no kidding.
Right. And so of the original Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
1989.
The old black and white one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sitting right there. So anyway, the take that I had was very oriented to that game's mechanic of humanity. And the fact that they had a death spiral where your behavior became more and more and more limited. I was going, not quite where I'm at here. I was really interested in the sort of soul-scarred, crazy dirks, crazy dudes.
Yeah.
In the sources that I have been mentioning. And what interested me was that it was a choice every time.
Right.
And so I was going, all right, we're sort of rocking with this somehow. Doing things, really diving into things like Over the Edge, let me realize that I could be as minimalistic as I wanted. And I found myself busting back to Wizard. So if you look at the rules of Wizard and then you say, oh, look, well, if you instead treat the dice as units rather than the pips on the dice, you'll see most of Sorcerer's mechanics right there.
Interesting.
So that was what I learned, was to start thinking about, okay, some games use the die as a unit in terms of what it does on and off, and other games use the die as a source of a range of quantities. Both are good or both are bad. Remember what I said, how does it load with the rest of the variables?
Sure.
And so you end up with a sort of basically almost a hack of Wizard with the design sensibilities of Over the Edge, with the kind of consequences of Cyberpunk. So these are sort of what was going on. And so really 1992-ish was really when I started to scribble. 1994, I think, was my first serious attempt to play. And I was, this is something snapped. Yes, I was in the design disorder. I'm like, I'm making this. I mean, if I keep playing it, I'm going to make it. It will become a made thing. And so that's exactly what I did. By 1996, I had a playable thing, and on the brand new stinking of birth fluids internet, I put it up to be available using actually a shareware model.
No kidding.
And we had to write code for this shit, okay? People had to fill in a thing, which was their email, and hit submit. And I just got an automatic email with a bunch of gobbledygook in it, just code.
Yep.
Their email was in there somewhere. And I would send them an email with the file attached. And since no files were compatible with anything, they hadn't even figured out PDFs yet. PDFs got figured out a few years later when everybody said, wait a minute, we already have a compatible file format. What on earth? You know, everybody was fighting over who was going to like come out with the universal file format, you know, and be able to like make all the money off it. And fuck, the thing's been sitting in our printers the whole time, right?
That's funny.
Right? It's true. But we didn't know that. And so therefore it was, if you can believe it, an ASCII file.
Oh, sure. I do believe that.
And
I'm old enough to remember all of this, right?
Excellent. So anyway, they'd get that. And if they liked it, and I included my address, my mailing address in the email that I sent. And if they liked it, they sent me $5 cash in an envelope.
That's cool.
And I got a whole bunch of $5 bills in the mail. So that's how I did it. And I, to my knowledge, am the first person to do commerce for a role-playing game in digital form only. A lot of people were starting to make them available for send away. You sent them money and they would send you the game. I have a few of those from that time. But then a lot of people were putting up stuff for free. But this was the first one. And I believe 2 years later, I was the first to sell PDFs. I think Monty Cook did it like after me, like by a month or something.
That's something.
So call it simultaneous. I'm okay with that. But it was out there. But yes, so I'm working on the game through this.
So looking at Sorcerer, and the answer could be both. Was it a thematic drive or a mechanics drive that led you into saying, I need to make this, and this is what it's becoming? Was it you wanting to redefine what the thematic game space was? When you talk about the pulp fantasy, or was it you meddling and getting mechanics? What drove the process of developing Sorcerer for you?
Remember my analogy of instrumentation. That's a little bit like saying, did you want the trumpet to sound like that, or did you want to work on the metallurgy and it ended up sounding like that?
Yeah.
To me, those are deeply intertwined issues. And
Right.
remember, you're talking to a trumpet player. Right. And so or an instrument or a musician who's like, I want to do this and I need a thing. And so to say, well, were you working on the materials? Were you interested in like the sound and the pressure and the hydraulics and the, and the resonance, or were you trying to get a certain sound? And the person's going to kind of look at you and go, can you not ask that question? Right?
Sure. Decoupling it's problematic.
There isn't decoupling. It makes no sense.
Right.
So not if you look at it that way. So, which I did. And so you should know that I now had my ears out big time to people talking about how role-playing worked. The biggest volume, the thing that had the biggest volume at the time was the Hogshead Publishing Group. And the little games they were putting out, and also the journal that they were putting out. I kind of bounced off those, to tell you the truth. I did not actually say, oh, I found my tribe. I was like, not seeing where you're going with this, or I'm not seeing what you're doing. What you're doing isn't where I'm at, or what I think is happening with this medium. They had their own way of looking at it and their own goals, and I could see that's not what I thought.
Yeah.
And also, there was a group on a Usenet forum that I was not part of. In fact, I stayed far away from all such things. Sort of the dark and sort of mutant prehistory of today's social media, right? So perhaps more honest actually than today's social media, however. Right? You know,
it doesn't take much, but I know what you're saying.
at least it was straightforwardly tooth and claw, right? So, but anyway, I didn't like that. And so, but I learned about discussions about some ideas about role-playing that I found extremely interesting, because they focused on personal aesthetic drives as to why you were sitting down and doing this and what you hoped to experience in it as an encompassing variable. Or as I saw of it, as an encompassing variable. Now, we're probably getting ahead, but the trouble is these things are simultaneous in time.
Yeah.
So the development of Sorcerer from a playable thing in 1996 into its book published form in 2000 is now utterly synonymous with me taking this body of thought and going, what am I going to do with that? Because as soon as I sort of delved into what they were saying, again, okay, all respect to the people involved, but I think those discussions, which was called the threefold, I think they fell off the tracks. They fell off. They crashed their car. Right, that conversation did not go. So, so when I'm sitting here going, but I think there's something here. Now, I was again seeking for terminology and being very academic in many ways. I didn't want to reinvent a term that someone else had already made. So the only person who'd come up with some taxonomy for game mechanics was Jonathan Tweet in his game Everway. And he talked about different kinds of mechanics that he called fortune, karma, and drama. And then you had the threefold, and they were talking about a completely different variable of these aesthetic drives and interactive outcomes that made you basically want to be there and also to do your thing in it. And I quite liked that. The way they crashed the cars, that they suddenly started talking about them as bodies of technique.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so they basically said, oh, well, if you're into this, then you would play like that. Well, if you're into that, you would play like this. And so if you were into what they called dramatism, then clearly you didn't want fucking dice, right? Stuff like that. So you see what I mean, though? They fell into that trap. Super easy to fall into. And I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's not what I'm into here, because I'm real into the instrumentation. The instrumentation creates constraint. Constraints bounce is what I call it today. All right. And so back then, I was looking at these bodies of terms, and I saw that there was already a redundancy. Tweet had drama as a particular technique. They had dramatism as an aesthetic drive. And I said, well, I'm going to write 1998, I kind of write an essay where I say, hey, can we start asking questions? Can we actually start asking questions about the instrumentation? That essay was called System Does Matter. And so I laid out those bodies of terms, none of them by me. And I said, look, just so we don't go crazy, let's rename this dramatism thing. We'll call it, and I pull out of the air, narrativism, just to replace that.
Right. So
there you get the origins of GNS, gamism, simulationism, narrativism. Two of those terms are from the threefold. The other one is just my renaming of it, just to remove the redundancy from the other body of work. No other reason. And then as time went by, and I realized that I really didn't really think the threefold was on the right track, I said, let's shift it all. I'm going to call that body of variables creative agenda, and I'm going to give them their own names. So that was a little bit later. That's when I started calling what I was doing its own thing and said the big model. Now, however, I've gotten ahead of myself because by then the Forge has begun. Okay. So this is all in the late 90s, right? I'm working up Sorcerer. I mean, even though that first version was now available, I'm playing the hell out of it and actually doing, I think, the necessary late-stage game design. I'm also writing up Sorcerer and Sword and playing it simultaneously. And so, therefore, because I had shifted out of the Sword and Sorcery, because nobody knew what I was talking about. And I kept having to explain it. And I was like, the hell with it. All right, you want modern? I'll do modern. Fine. So anyway, and besides Hellblazer, I've been reading Hellblazer for years. Why not, right? So my take here is that I have gone through this, and at the same time, I've kind of dipped my toe in the waters of what all these other people are saying and trying to use as much as what people have contributed as I possibly can. And to try to create a dialogue about that. I find a place on the internet called the Gaming Outpost where, God bless them, and to their eternal sorrow, actually was able to set up a little subforum of my own where we started talking about this. RPGNet was happily leaping about in silly directions all the time, right, and was also a fertile place to go and occasionally say something, and maybe like two people would go, that was interesting. What was that? Right. And inside all the cacophony. So also, I got very, very interested in the publishing thing at this time. So you can see where this is going. First of all, there's me working on this game. There's me thinking about how games work, trying to pull some ideas together. There's me now starting to interact socially with a bit of a space of my own. That's going. And at this point, I start getting nibbles because Sorcerer, unbeknownst to me, is now being read and looked at and sometimes played by luminaries. I had no idea, right? But it's happening. And I've had a few reviews and a couple of little zines and stuff like that. And this is back when zines still got mailed to you.
Sure.
So that's sort of happening. I'm a little surprised too. I'm kind of like, wait, somebody besides the 5 people I know are, looking at this?
I've only got $25. What the hell?
Exactly. Who are you? So, that this sort of thing is happening though. And I'm going, well, holy crap. So, and I'm working on it. And also the game is teaching me things. The game itself is teaching me things. I call the game a demon. I summoned it and then it fucking told me shit. Right. So I'm having these experiences with saying this game is teaching me more than I'm designing it. And then I found myself actually able to do pulp sorcery. And so we're doing that. At the same time, I am willing. Oh, and I have a mailing list, a sorcerer mailing list. So I am willy-nilly creating or sitting in a little community. It's happening. So all the time that is happening, I start getting nibbles and interest from people who publish role-playing games coming to me. I have never been to a role-playing convention at this time. I had never gone to Gen Con, nothing. And so I found it interesting. Now, I was heavily into comics, and I knew a lot of comics pros. And I paid a lot of attention to their employment circumstances. I had been, I do not know how this happened, but I had been at like an executive writers and artists like professional meeting in Chicago with DC. And I mean, I had ended up there and through invitation and was, introduced around, and I was getting that weird feeling of, oh, this is Ron. Oh, Ron, yeah, how are you doing? This is a while ago. This is a few years before this. We'll talk about, but I'm giving you this as an example of some of my experiences. And then when they sat down for the meeting, I was sort of expecting for like somebody to like clap me on the shoulder or take me over to the bar and like let the fan, hang out over there. No, they fucking sat me down. I'm like there in between the editor on this side and that writer on this side. And I'm like,
well, how did that happen, Ron? Like what were you doing?
This is a long story.
Well, I want to hear it. Or like, what were you? I do.
Okay. Footnote. Because first I want to tie it to what I was saying. I brought it up for a reason. I brought it up for a reason that I knew a shitload about independent and non-independent comics publishing from the other side. I was that kind of person who knew comics pros. I was a reader. I'd gotten some letters published, but then there was a snap, and all of a sudden I was on this other side of the process. And I saw what it was like for them. The reason I brought up that meeting was how badly the editors abused and the managers abused the creators. The way they spoke to them, what they had to put up with. It was horrific. Absolutely horrific.
And the comic industry is notorious for that.
Sure. And this was early 90s. So, and it was absolutely horrific. I mean, to the point where I almost like picked up a knife, and went after somebody because they were just so that bad. And I told myself, now remember, I was a person who was doing very well in academic science. I got my master's, which at that particular university was a fairly substantive thing, and moving into the PhD, and had my sights on my academic career. I had publications. As a graduate student, I had a very strong teaching record, all kinds of things. So I was very solid in my life at this time. Paid like a waiter, as marginal as all graduate students, worse than a waiter. Sure. I don't get tips. I mean, and so I was marginal as hell as a graduate student, but I was feeling pretty weighty in my zone. So nobody talks down to me. Right. So I'm like, why are all these amazing creators who put out all these great comics listening to this, 28-year-old asshole with tassel loafers talk to them this way? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm getting at. I had decided that should I be involved in pop culture, I was going to pay attention to the independent comic book creators. He's very controversial and people have 10 million opinions about him, but everything he did regarding owning your own work is notable, and that's Dave Sim with Cerebus the Aardvark. And a bunch of other people like that, people who are adjacent or he was adjacent to, or all this huge raft. And I paid strict attention to all of their economic ups and downs and started asking the right questions to all the pros I knew and people like that. And so I had that very deeply in my mind.
Right.
And very quickly, after one or two contacts with the and see, the role-playing so-called industry is kind of like to the comics industry as, as sort of the comics books industry at that time wanted to be the movie industry so bad. Yeah. And the role-playing industry wanted to be the comic book industry so bad. Right. And so anyway, but that's how they acted. Even when they were being friendly and chummy and, we're all in it together and you'll always be able to do what you want and all this stuff. And I'm just thinking about this last 10 years of me being so deeply embedded with the comics people. Literally embedded, right, in the culture of making comics. Now it's like, fuck you.
Sure.
You're out of your mind. I know you are a penny ante version of the very same people that I've been watching for 10 years. And
I've seen this movie.
Yeah. Not only that, but you're like a really low rent version of it. So, I said, no, I'm doing it my way. I'm Drew Haight with Poison Elves. Same thing. I'm doing it his way. And so I went ahead, and said, I'll just start putting out this game myself. So do you see what I mean? And especially because there it is, there's this whole internet thing. So all these things are happening at once. The intellectualism, the design and play. I've also been playing experimentally. That's really kicked in after that point of the early 90s of saying, I'm going to play every game I can in good faith. In good faith. I'm going to try this thing. We're going to see how it plays. We are going to enjoy ourselves. We're not going to test it. We're testing it. We're playing it. And I haven't stopped. That boomed, and I have not. I've played so many games, and I do so in good faith to enjoy them. And I found that to be a wonderfully liberating experience. You're not trying to sell it to your friends. Oh, I found the right game. We finally found it. We finally found the game. No, none of this. No, it's not a marriage. This is an activity, and there are thousands of instruments. Let's enjoy. And they make different music. You may have to bring a completely different aesthetic to play this. It doesn't work for you. You're going to have to find a different kind of artistry to do this. So so all of that is really cresting in the late 90s. It hits an inflection point, basically. So through a series of the usual missteps, which are the same as for any band, like a rock band, and read the early years of any rock band. Okay, now just translate that into me trying to do shit with different people. And you end up with The Forge. And that's where I kind of pull it together.
Got it. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break, Ron, because The Forge has been brought up on this show so many times, and you have a very unique view on it because of your participation and what your relationship is with The Forge. So let's take a quick break. When we get back from this break, I want to talk about The Forge. I want to talk about when it really became what is obviously a breeding ground for so many of the designs and games that we play today. We'll be right back.
This is Sean. You may have heard of me from such movies as Brett and Sean Go to Illinois, 2 Motorcycles, 1 Stick of Dynamite, and Gaming and BS. What kind of RPG podcast is that? After my NFTs were stolen, I decided to become a patron of Third Floor Wars. The content is great and it costs me less than a good shot of liquor. So consider becoming a patron. It may just land you your next big role. Head over to patreon.com/Third Floor Wars. Tell Craig Sean sent you.
trying to figure out the best way to do this, Ron. So let's do this. Let's assume. So the term The Forge is thrown around on this show several times, right? Where I've had people go, and I was talking to the people on The Forge, and, I had some people on The Forge give me these thoughts, and, there's a discussion on The Forge, and that led to this. And I realized that for a lot of my listeners, and for me initially too, having, Rumpelstiltskin all of this time, I wasn't playing role-playing games during this time. Let's step a little bit backwards here, and let's talk, if we can, Ron, about what is The Forge and where did The Forge come from?
Oh, golly, you really want to go through that whole Rock Band origin thing? All right, I'm going to try to keep that part brief because the real question is, what is it? But briefly, I and two other people proposed to each other to create a website. And the purpose of the website would be to collect all the cool little independently made role-playing games that we could find that were scattered all over the internet on GeoCities sites and God knows what, and actually give them a platform, basically give them a place that you could go and you could see this batch of games. And there were a couple of other people who were kind of doing this in a very list-oriented way. One was a guy named Eric. Eric's free RPG page, which was a gold mine, by the way. And so what we wanted, though, was to play the games. So we would talk. Now, we didn't have, YouTube or anything like that. Yeah. So we were talking at that time about reviews, but I didn't really like that. Reviews is such a Ponzi bullshit. I mean, the reviewers are always on the side of the product, of the production industry at the very least. Yeah. Even panning though something means you are in the power position, being able to do it as a decision maker. You're not
very much so.
You're not a part of the audience. Screw you. I hate reviewers. And so, so I didn't really want to do that, but that was kind of the only language we had for it. But anyway, so one of those guys, whose name was Ed Healy, and I put the site together, and he gave it its name, Hephaestus Forge. Mm-hmm. And that led to, there wasn't like a breakdown between us. There was just different logistic shit that made everything not work.
Right.
And then a friend of both of ours remember, we've been interacting at the Gaming Outpost and through the Sorcerer mailing list, all of us, the whole time.
Interesting.
So that's the actual origin of all of this. My forum at the Gaming Outpost and the Sorcerer mailing list. And then we're all three, and other people are all pulling in weird little games that they're making up, and mostly just posting online, and no one ever sees them, right? So, and some of them are freaking brilliant. We found this one weirdo, guy named Jared Sorensen, right? And he was like, "Ooh, look, more weirdos," right? So, so there was a bunch of people, and the third guy that started talking with me about this, but he didn't get involved in setting up Hephaestus Forge, but he was really big in the early discussions of all this, was Mike Merles, who later went on to publishing in the more mainstream, if that's the right word. So anyway, the guy who comes in now, who is just basically now just me and him, is Clinton Nixon. So Clinton Nixon and I set up a new website. Ed had given the site the URL Indie RPGs, one word. And that whole URL was no longer the domain. Forget all that stuff, right? Hell in a handbasket. So Clinton stuck a hyphen in there. So indie-RPGs. So that's our new doing. So that was the thing. And by indie, you can see where I'm going with this. It's straight out of comics. It means creator owned. Doesn't mean anything else. The content, like I said, the medium is the medium, right? That's the content's of no interest whatsoever, except insofar as we're interested in what you're doing, that you're doing it. So we also had learned from studying RPGNet, and Clinton and I studied RPGNet like anthropologists. And we said, what don't we like? What do we like? We're going to do a forum, and we're going to set up sections, and it's going to be like a tiny thing in comparison, really tiny. You're going to be able to see the whole thing at once.
Yep.
Like just by scrolling down a little bit, you'll see the whole thing. And you will have only so many functions. There's no chat hangout, open discussion, none of that. And I basically am using, science teacher logic. I'm like, we're here for a purpose. Here, you can talk about this stuff. Here, you can talk about that stuff, and you're going to treat people decently. And so I brought basically my standards for how people should talk to one another. I quickly found myself in the position of having to explain to people, you're not on the internet when you come here.
Nice.
When you're here, you're not on the internet. I will choose what I call to be a flame. That's not a flame. It is because I say it is. And I would not. And also, I did everything publicly. I never deleted posts and I never banned anybody. I told them what I thought right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. This was a whole different environment. And somebody, now there is a fellow who just wrote a book about the Forge as a community, but I had a really hard time getting it across to him, this aspect of it, which he actually did study. And he was like, what were you doing there? That's amazing. What was this? And I just couldn't get it across, which was that basically it was setting standards for what we talk about and how we talk about it that still left it open for people to surprise themselves and us and anyone else. Right. And there was no status, right? There wasn't like, advanced member or anything like that. But of course, status games started coming in. Of course they did. And there were two things that I really hated in that regard. One was that the software said how many comments and posts you had. And I didn't even know it was there. I'm such a doofus. I didn't even know it was there. I mean, I was using the Forge for like we had the Forge going for 4 years before I realized somebody referred to, well, that guy has so many posts and I didn't feel good about challenging him. I'm like, wait, what? How do you know?
Interesting.
Number? Oh my God, there's a number there. Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm a complete doofus about all these things that other people like gravitate to. Right.
Well, I was just about to say, it's amazing how we do gravitate to that, right? As we try to differentiate and find ways to segment things. That's fascinating.
And so, but the Forge was built to minimize that as much as possible.
Right.
But the number thing got past me. And then another thing, which was very difficult, was that by the time a few years had passed, we now had people, instead of pulling together people who had games and proto games out there, which was good. But then once the discussions got going, and as I continued to come up with things that I wanted to do, all these other people are starting to make their own, which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with this at all. But you can see that it is intrinsic of who's a publisher, who's a designer, and who isn't. And I tried to whack-a-mole on that as hard as I could.
Yeah.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. There were two things that were going on in that first phase, 2000 through 2004-ish. One of them was the gathering, people hearing about it. The other was the Forge booth, which began as the first Sorcerer booth in 2001 I just out of sheer amused jealousy at some friends of mine who had put out a role-playing game with an actual book and had not lost their shirts. And I was like, how did you do that? And I said, well, I'll put out 500 copies. I want to just say I did it. Right. So I did. And I was hoping that I would never publish another physical book again. Yeah, that didn't work out quite well. But it was I should have stuck with that, believe me, but I didn't. So part of it was that booth then became a gathering booth itself at Gen Con, where I would have people get exhibitor badges and then their game would be at the booth with them. And so you see that had happened by accident at the first Sorcerer booth.
And that's
there's this picture of like 25, 30 different people, all like excited about what was going on. And a lot of them had their own little games that I had encouraged them to bring.
Yeah.
So it was a mini convention there. We had this mini convention and it boomed. And so we did this. And I said, well, let's just keep doing this. Let's do it this way. And I did that for quite a number of years. And now Gen Con went through all these changes. It shifted to Indianapolis, changed ownership, things like that. And I always worked with the management because I knew we were bending rules. But it turns out that I win the Diana Jones Award and people are paying attention to the Forge. And the Gen Con was really happy to have, like, you know, the Forge entity inside it. And so that was a way for people to get to Gen Con and to show off their game or their game and design in a communal sense with people who liked the fact that they were doing it. And so organizing that, and I lost money every damn time. The exhibitor badges kept getting more expensive, and I didn't raise the compensation, or, you know, the rules for this, the rules for that would changed, and, you know, I'd end up losing my shirt on it. So I made absolutely nothing out of any of that. But I did that for a long time. So again, people, that has really gotten rolling. By 2004, the Forge booth is like, you know, a go-to now for a lot of people, or people are being directed there. So that's happening. The Forge itself is, you know, Clinton and I go through conference after conference every 6 months, say, how is this working? You know, how is it going wrong? You know, stuff like that. And all this is occurring. And then I am putting out the Sorcerer supplements. I had planned on Sorcerer and Sword. My reading of related literature led me to do the Sorcerer's Soul, which was also, I realized another angle on what I was doing. I really focused on the humanity mechanic, and I was like, okay, I need to get that there, and I figured I was done. Then I got this horrible idea that I needed to discuss sex, gender, and interactions of real people at the role-playing table in regard to sex and gender.
Interesting.
And so I had to put out Sex and Sorcery.
Right.
And so that's where a whole bunch of things that sort of a lot of highly gendered games appeared after that. A lot of things where nobody, and I had done, part of that was writing Troll Babe, but after that, the idea of, okay, there must be a samurai character, he must be a man, and he must be played by a woman, like the game Kagamatsu, which it was unheard of before that.
Right.
All that stuff started to occur after Sex and Sorcery. I put out my little funny game called Elves. Troll Babe was a big one for me. It was the first game I did, published in 2003, the first time. That was the moment when I realized that I was badly, I really had the disorder. I had the severe form. I had not cleansed myself with all the games that I had felt like doing, of which Elves
the purge hadn't happened.
The purge hadn't happened. Instead, I had opened the door to the dark dimension, and the vile beings were now suffusing my psyche. And so I was doomed. I was just going to have to write role-playing games from now on.
Yeah.
And it got worse. I mean, it got worse. I recovered my personal politics due to events in the world at that time. I had kind of dampened them down after deciding that my side had lost for good.
Yeah.
In the 80s. And then decided that as a professor, now the PhD's done by now. You know, I got a professor job straight out of graduate school, you know, no postdoc for me. I took one look at the postdoc and was like, you got to be out of your fucking mind.
Good.
And I'm going to be a prof. So I'm a biology professor, you know, evolutionary biology, PhD in zoology, multiple publications, the whole thing. I'm doing the whole deal. And now I'm in this position where I'm like, I cannot be in this societal position without taking a political stance on things. It needs to be done. It's part of the job as far as I'm concerned. So then, of course, I start checking up on things, and I start writing these works like Spione and Shahida. So I'm doing these things which are basically these enormous discourses on, you know, historical politics that are relevant to today. And then I put little games in them. So, but the point is that is the journey of what the Forge was. It was a forum. It was boring. It was physically boring. It had 7 or 8, it had 4 or 5 sections, and then there were publisher forums too. And then in each one, you could, if say there was one, I mean, we changed up the categories, you know, over and over as the time went by, as we decided what we were going to do. But there was a number of things that are relevant. One was that you were not to treat newcomers as second-class citizens. They were always to be the first priority.
Interesting.
It was more
That's
important
smart.
to talk to newcomers than it was to talk to each other. That was what I wanted. Whether it worked, who knows? After I realized that things had gotten out of hand in 2006 and 7, both with the status games and with the Forge booth, with the same people coming back over and over again, and that means new people, weren't able to come. I basically said, okay, the way the Forge booth is going to work from now on, so this is 2007, you can't come back. You can come for 2 years, and then you can't come back. So, and it's going to be, $100 buy-in for the first year and a $200 buy-in for the second. And that's how it's going to be. A indie press revolution had begun at that point, and we shared with and he was Brennan Taylor, and he and I got sort of a bigger booth thing set up, but that turned into kind of a store situation, and that overshadowed what we were doing, and that lasted for a couple of years. And then I finally said, no, we're busting back. I mean, I do much better with a crappy sign on a street corner. That is my natural environment.
Yeah.
I am the guy on the street corner, and I've got my crappy little sign. And I lost a lot of friends with all these moves because I refused to brand the Forge. I refused to let the Forge be a label that you could put on a book. I refused to lay claim to the publishing that had benefited from our work, like with some sort of royalty or contractual deal or anything like that. And I had people who were super savvy on all this stuff who really wanted to do this. And they were talking to bigger companies and media groups, all their connections, that they were like loaded for bear to jump us up into this huge status in pop culture. And I wouldn't say I sat there with my principles and stroked my chin and refused.
Sure.
I was just fucking stupid. I don't get it. So, I wouldn't respond to certain overtures, or I would make a decision about how I want to do it that was just against what would help their goals. And so you end up, there's a huge teardown at that time. So that's what the Forge was. It was a forum for, I coined the term actual play. That was one of the names, the name of the very first forum of sets. There was indie design, there was actual play, and there was publishing. And then we had one that we called GNS discussion, and then we called it, RPG theory or whatever. I mean, it was places to talk about this stuff. And those were it. Later we shifted up a little. There was one called First Thoughts for any to just chit chat about the game ideas that you were thinking over. But that was the basic idea. Actual play was one of them, and the idea is that just talk about what happened in the game. Just talk about it. Talk about the people, right? Talk about the people. Talk about what you did. Talk about how it went. And I even started insisting that I don't even want you talking about theory until you do that. I don't want to talk about anything to do with your abstractions, your spin-offs of these ideas that I've had. I had essays. I had developed my essays until that time. Unfortunately, people were starting to treat them like the Talmud and taking them somewhere else on the internet and, misquoting shit or making shit up and whatever. And they were and again, just like the old threefold, it was very easy to take my notions of what creative drive you were bringing and what socially and creatively you were hoping to experience out of it. It was very easy to mistake that for some sort of preference for certain kinds of mechanics.
Right.
Nobody's ever gotten past that. I mean, only people who've interacted directly with me and the community that I'm working with ever goes, oh, so you're not saying that if I'm into stories that I don't have to, but no one ever gets there on their own. So it's always been frustrating to me that I just can't seem to get that across. That's why talking about this as a medium and instrumentation is better. Then once we get that down and realize that content can be whatever and instrumentation can be whatever, it's relevant, it matters. Then you say, and socially, why are we doing this instead of watching porn?
Right.
What are you getting out of this in terms of this creative thing?
Yep.
And I have come to the conclusion that what I used to call, or what people originally called, and what I continued to call simulationism, was simply people who were struggling with the medium itself. Because you see, if you're struggling with the medium itself, and you run into the murk all the time, and you're dealing perhaps, and you're not even aware of different priorities of why people are even there, the whole thing is going to seem horribly fragile to you. The whole thing is going to seem terribly fraught. And you have to stake out your claim, and you have to pick the right game, and you have to, maybe you have to write your own game to be the right game, God damn it, at last. And no more arguments. I'm so sick of them. No, this is the anti-argument crowd. We can't have arguments at the table. And so you basically, if you're in this state, it means you don't have the medium down. You and the people with you just have never hit the point where the medium was a reliable experience. So to you, that has to be the priority. It has to be the priority of design. It has to be the priority of the experience. And it's to the point where then if I say, well, then what do we do with the medium? They're like, no, it's for its own sake. God damn it. Right? You're like, oh, okay. Because without going into it in more detail, I tried to give that point of view as much credence as I could as an aesthetic device of its own. And my experiences with people who advocate for it, I have come to realize that that's the issue. They are struggling with the medium. Once the medium gets rolling, then what I was calling creative agenda, those are other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my I don't know, I should tell you why I called it the big model.
Please.
After I abandoned the old terminology and started calling like what they called gamist play, they did very dismissively. We're not going to talk about the gamists. They're troglodytes. But I was like, I like competitive play. What the hell, right? So anyway, I called it step on up. That was your aesthetic. Step on up, buddy. Let's go. Right. Let's play this thing. Either we're going to beat the obstacle that it poses together, or we're going to compete, whatever it is. But we're doing that. That's our jam. Right. So I called that step on up. The aesthetic that I called that I was calling narrativism, which means regardless of instrumentation, you are into what the characters do as a decision-making experiential process by which you end up with plot. Like the wake of your boat. You're like, holy shit, look, a plot. Right?
That's right.
And so, but to say that it's utterly emergent in a completely unconsidered way is bullshit. You considered everything very deeply. Right. And so that's what I was calling that narrative. You try explaining that sometime.
I don't want to.
I'll tell you one thing. You ever try?
No.
No. If you do.
Oh.
Don't use the word story.
I could see that.
Right. So anyway, but I started just calling that story now, meaning that it wasn't made up beforehand and it wasn't cobbled together retrospectively, but we were doing things that did story making. So that's what I called it. But I put those together as priorities in the big model, which then I talked about the medium, right? So then you do things in the medium, and the medium has time and things happen, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. The big thing, however, the reason it's called the big model is that the overall encompassing thing is the social group, these people playing the game at this time. This was to get away from the idea that you have social stuff over here, and then you have game and rules and role-playing and stuff over there. And I said, horseshit. Anything you do by rolling dice is encompassed in that social group among you, and all of the squishy and unmentionable nuances of how people deal with one another. And that was a big deal. That's why I called it big. The biggest thing is the people, and then everything we do, what we imagine together, and then how we work with it and things happen in it is inside that. So that was the essence of the thought that was developed through many bloody discussions at the Forge over that. If you go back to the Sorcerer mailing list, a 10-year period. Does that help a little bit?
It does. And one of the things that, I was picking up as I was learning about all of this, Ron, was the contentious discussions in a positive way. Like, so it's spoken of in a positive way that like you had people that were just fighting, but fighting for learning and fighting for advancement. Right.
I'm glad to hear people say that still.
Yeah, like, and I think I was like, wow, this sounds like a really interesting thing to me. So I'm going to ask a terrible question. So get ready for this one. And the answer might be, Craig, I don't have an answer for this one. Looking at it, do you think there's any highlights? I'm going to try to phrase this, so work with me for just a second. What were you think are some of the highlights or the big things that matured because of the way you set up the Forge, the way the Forge functioned by design and by just process because of who participated in it? Was there some things that rose out of this that you think was unique to what it was? I'm
going to give you an answer that will tell you a lot about me.
Okay.
Which is to go economic. Which is to say that when I started this, when I and the others founded the Forge, to publish your own game was regarded as trifling. Trifling. I mean, what kind of a publisher are you?
Right.
And there were people who continued to try through the course of the hobby, but the 90s were horrific for this. Really bad, particularly in terms of expense. And it was considered the stupidest, silliest, amateurish thing you could do.
Right.
And still, people struggled and tried. And there were a couple of notable points. I give a lot of credit in the late 90s and 2000, same time, John Wick publishing his own game, Orc World, which I regard highly. A number of others. Greg Stafford actually had his own publishing company for a while, and that's another good example.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was real interested. Most people who did this had one booth at Gen Con for 1 year and lost their shirts in every possible way and had to mulch their print run so they wouldn't get taxed on it. And that was the end of them. And the number of people who had that experience are legion. And so by the time I was, saying, okay, the Forge has done its job, which was around 2007, I said, we've done our job, and I announced at that time, Forge is going to close. Now, Clinton and I had always talked about it as a finite endeavor. But I think that was like the first time I was like, so when the Forge closes, and everybody's like, oh, what? And I was like, what?
Did we not say that out loud before?
Didn't I say that? And so, but anyway, that's around the time, because at that time, you didn't have to be at the Forge booth to hold your head up as an independent publisher anymore.
Right.
And you didn't have to publish in terms of being a commercial entity in the hobby anymore.
Yep.
And there were now the beginnings of social media, and there were communities and platforms and whatever. And I had told everybody at the Forge, in fact, there's an infamous quote of mine. It was like, I said nicely, I wrote, said nicely, go away. It is time to grow up. This is a learning place. You hang around here, you're going to be just like those sad grad students who stick around in the coffee shops, who never finish their degrees, and are just like sitting there like growths in the academic community. That's what you're going to be like. Just go away, right? So anyway, that was kind of my one takeaway was to answer your question was, now, can somebody say, should some spunky person out there recapitulate prior discussions and say, oh, that would have happened anyway? I mean, the internet did that. You didn't do that. Well, all I have to say to that is that it hit hard. It hit hard. There was nobody in role-playing publishing who didn't know about this. Tons of people squelched up wanting to be involved. And I said, you're not an independent publisher. You publish other people's work. Go away.
Yep.
And so it was, if you look at the people who participated there and see what a lot of them have gone on to do, I think you'll see the impact. So,
well, it speaks for itself.
Well, I don't know if it does or not. I mean, I get I get perhaps different feedback than you've been getting.
That's possible.
A lot of my feedback is acrimonious.
Yeah.
But so
what drives that, out of curiosity, Ron? That's surprising to me.
It's a whole nother thing.
Okay.
But let me tell you the answer that may have been more on your mind. I don't know, which is what ideas. What ideas? Now, I will say that there was 2 remarkable instances. And actually, it does tie into what you just asked. One was that a group of people decided they didn't like being at the Forge because it wasn't cash and cool enough. And the founder of the new website said, I want the cool guys at the Forge in the relaxed atmosphere of RPGNet.
Okay.
And went and made a forum with its own rules called Story Games. Now, Story Games was created, therefore, as a direct defiance, a direct fuck you to the
response. Yep.
And from people who were involved. And a number of the people, now the founder, to his credit, realized that he didn't like what had become of it and stepped away from it quite soon. I regard Story Games as something of a pest hole, despite a lot of honest effort on certain individuals' parts. But it created, first of all, the name was a good name to start. It was chosen to mean nothing.
Okay.
It was chosen to mean literally nothing. It said, listen, all we know is that these things make fiction somehow. Let's just call them that. I mean, fiction-making games sounds like bullshit. We'll call them story games, right? And it'll mean nothing. That's the whole point. It'll mean nothing. You can pump into it whatever you want.
It wasn't a directive.
Right. Well, that was no. And that was a very good name in that sense. Instantly became an identity marker for making games in a specific way. There was creators there who did games in a very specific way, and the status games that I had kept whack-a-moling at the Forge just boomed there. And all of a sudden you had this hierarchy of the right proper kind of game to make, to call it a story game. And that's how Story Games, the term, was born.
Interesting.
Not at the Forge. In fact, I would say that I was appalled. So that doesn't necessarily mean that every game that is called a story game by its creator is a bad game, but the percent of them that are good is nothing to write home about.
Sure.
So that's one thing. Simultaneously, you're probably familiar with Dragon's Foot Forum, and you're probably familiar with the fact that the Open Gaming License was made available by Wizards of the Coast in 1999. Wizards of the Coast was already in the middle of its Hasbro purchase in kind of this stepwise fashion. So, even though no one else knew that was coming, they did. But anyway, so they do the OGL so basically the Adkison team is already planning the flip. They got TSR from the Williams crew, and then they were going to flip, and they got Pokemon and they got Gen Con, right? And they were going to flip that to Hasbro, and Peter wanted to keep Gen Con, and he did. So anyway, that was all in process right then. So what happens specifically is that a number of people encounter the Forge and learn about self-publishing, and there's this OGL, which means, and for the longest time, people kept saying, oh, but you guys wouldn't do D20 games. We're like, why not? So all these people started showing up at the Forge booth with D20 stuff, which is fine. But again, I didn't care what was in the things, except insofar as we wanted to talk about them actually doing what they do and not being fake design. But you should know that the Forge booth did not vet the games. And a lot of people showed up and got an exhibitor badge at the Forge booth, through arrangement with me beforehand, whose games I did not know, and they weren't active at the Forge. So though I did not vet them, that's very important. So with that in mind, a lot of people were starting to read, and I know this from the people in question, they read Sorcerer and Sword and said, holy crap, you can have literary integrity when you do a role-playing game. And they went and dug into their fave fantasy and said, I want to do that.
I want to play here.
Right. And so that Sorcerer and Sword was like the boom for that, for a lot of people. So a lot of people at Dragon's Foot are suddenly discovering that their D&D isn't your D&D, which was kind of a revelation back around 2000.
Interesting.
And so, people were, I always give this example of people saying, yeah, I played original D&D, Red Box. You're kind of like, that was 1985. What do you mean original D? What are you talking about? Well, it said basic on the cover, and you're like, oh my God. Right?
It was already 12 years old.
I know. It had been through like 2 different owners, and so anyway, I am saying that at the Forge, a lot of people who were very interested in the scholarship of D&D and who were learning about self-publishing and who were learning that they could do their own fantasy bounced from there to become major players in the very early stuff that later would be called OSR. So the OSR terminology was brought in around 2006, and its first rumbles really kind of took hold around 2008. And yet, for whatever reason, so at that point, up until around 2009 or so, people involved with that stuff were very friendly toward their history with the Forge. Social media kicked in 2009. And staking out social media as an internet of its own, recapitulating the horrors of the early internet in full and institutionalizing and monetizing them, had turned basically into, a hellscape. It's weird. What I call it, I finally had somebody explain like the dark web to me. What was the dark web? And they explained it to me, and I was like, isn't that the internet? Because, I wasn't embedded in all these different platforms and different notifications and stuff like that. I didn't have my phone synced in and all this stuff. And so I didn't have an Instagram that I pumped stuff out and tweet, right? That whole thing which is to people, the internet, to me, that's a hellscape. I call what they call the dark web. I'm like, okay, this is safe. This is a safe place. This place is good.
I can trust these people.
So if you connect with people and set things up, you can trust people, right? It's like I'd rather deal with street people, and some of them are junkies and some of them are murderers. Right. But at least, you're going to figure that out pretty fast. Right. I'd rather be in there than in some corporate environment, right? With everybody in their little cubicles. So anyway, with that going on, that's where you're going to get weird animosities toward the Forge. The story games people, for lack of a better word, have different views. And some people it's not even a matter of being friendly with people, right? This is not about friendship and loyalty. I never drew on anybody for loyalty, and I don't give a shit about that. And my whole point about the Forge was that you go away, you get better, and you go away. I don't want to keep people. Didn't want to grow the community, right? That was this is crazy talk to a lot of people.
It's very unique, Ron. I'm fascinated by it.
The problem was it was incomprehensible to anybody. Right? So It was very difficult to talk about this So anyway, I've been very negative about story games, but then a lot of people, I'm going to say, were very, very authentic as individuals and with their own work. So don't get me wrong. But it became clear, however, that to distance yourself from the Forge verbally became sort of a piece of that culture. Whatever happened in the OSR to suddenly create a story games hating Ron Edwards as the father of story games, of all things. Some narrative got going with doofuses. And some of them were very loud. And some of them were expert, absolutely expert at their new zones of sphere and training people to be looking at things a certain way. And so actually, I find the OSR kind of fascinating. First of all, in terms of publishing and the games that they make. See, there isn't an OSR. That's the other thing. I say they. There isn't one. Nobody knows what it is. It's a label you can stick on a book. That's all it is. So, and what is it? It's the Forge. People are making all sorts of cool games their way. fantastic. If they want to fetishize a particular game that they're bouncing off of, go ahead. I don't care. I mean, and also all these so-called retro clones aren't anyway. You go back and you read the differences in the way they explain things, like, okay, it's a different game. So, but they just don't like to think of it that way. With a lot of the people who self-identify as the OSR, I regard them a lot like rock musicians, who most of them do great things, but for God's sake, don't listen to them talk.
Right.
Or if you do, just get ready to, kick back. I mean, you ever read an interview with Robert Plant?
Yes.
What a moron.
Yeah, it's insufferable. And Page is the same way.
Yeah. Well, at least Page is smart, though. I mean, Page is one of the guys, if he talks about music, I will listen, actually. Plant's a bonehead. And there's a whole bunch of guys like him, gals like him out there. So the OSR culture and community kind of thrives on sort of the know-nothing bleating. Doesn't mean that great games and great play aren't happening. So, but neither of those references the Forge as a good thing, and it has become obscure.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. But that's pretty much the way it's happened. To answer your question of culturally what's occurred.
Well, I mean, it's been such it's so fascinating because this whole endeavor that I'm going through with this podcast and this Insider Insight series is kind of like an archaeological historical view for myself.
In this case, so much.
And it's so fascinating because and I'm learning different pockets, and learning about different things and now I need to start learning more about the OSR because I keep hearing the term
there's great stuff at work. There's some great fun games at work, no question.
There's games that I've come across that people are saying, well, that's OSR. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, all I know is I like the game. Like, I think this is interesting and starting to hear that form. But, at the same time as I was exploring other things, I kept hearing the Forge, and having no idea that there was any type of acknowledgement, let alone gap that happens between them. So that's fascinating. So guys, we're going to take another quick break. And one of the things that I've really been looking forward to is to talk about what Ron's doing now and the concept that he has in play, which is what we call adept play. So let's take a quick break and let's talk about what Ron is doing today. We'll be right back.
This is the part of many podcasts where someone comes on, interrupts the show, and explains that you should consider paying for the content that you're listening to right now for free. That pitchman explains by giving $1 or more a month, you not only support the show, but you allow the show to grow and improve. Here on the third floor, we refuse to interrupt your episode of Tabletop Talk with such time-wasting pleas. We pledge never to run a spot asking you to go to patreon.com and give $1 or more a month because supporting content creators keeps the content coming, even if there is a link in the show's description. And there is. We don't ask you to click it and become a patron. We don't waste time rambling about the benefits like early access to episodes, getting episodes without ad breaks like this, or even getting a chance to play in one of Craig's RPG sessions. Anyway, enjoy this episode knowing Tabletop Talk, despite being supported by its patrons, won't engage in such blatant appeals for support.
So Ron, during all of this happening, we've talked about it and you've alluded to it, you have a full career, right? You have a full-time job right. Uh-huh. But at some point role playing became what you wanted to do, or were you tired of academics? So I'd be curious to know when the jump here happens, when you leave career and start taking role playing as, what you do.
Let's first of all say that I have always been a multi-track person. And that I can look at early examples which are interesting, but in the 90s, I knew that role-playing was something that I would be doing constantly. And starting in the early 90s, I knew that martial arts study would be doing something that I would be doing constantly. And I was dedicated to my academic career. I liked it. I had a lot of independence, and I rapidly got activity, status, and interactions, fruitful, personal, fruitful interactions, both with teaching and with research. So I was one of the happier academics I've ever met.
Yeah.
But to me, it made perfectly good sense for one evening to be spent playing, a little-known role-playing game called The Whispering Vault, and then the next night, be fighting a guy who's at the Air Force Base, right, who works out with us. And then the night after that, getting my lectures together for, why parasitism should be managed through transmission rather than virulence.
Right.
Why we should bring the transmission down. You'll notice the relevance at the moment. Why we should be bringing transmission down through a wide variety of means rather than just leaping to something that shuts off the virulence. There are many reasons not to do that as plan A. So anyway, but that's the thing. I mean, that was my life, going through those things and stuff like them all at once. And so it was very rich social life, very, very dynamic, very stimulating. And I would imagine
a lot of non-concentric circles too, Ron,
absolutely.
Right? You had this community that you interacted with and were a part of, and then a separate community that that's got to be valuable.
Well, yes, but I also found that often through my participation that people would jump. People would find I was a door. As a person, I am a door. People get interested in that other thing. And so that happened a lot. Well, as it turns out, okay, with that context, if that's the kind of person that I am, academia as a professor began in 1998 after I got my PhD in 97. And I was first at a college in Georgia. And then I went to the place that I really wanted to go, which was DePaul University in Chicago. So I was returning to where I had got my undergrad degree, not the same institution, but to the city. And so in that context, I started a role-playing club. So you can see that, I'm still, multi-tracking this whole time. And the Forge is going full blast. I mean, I started at DePaul in 1999. So, I mean, most of everything that I've talked to you about, I was a prof that whole time. So we are talking like hardcore teaching loads. We're talking about advising. We're talking about committee work, all that shit, all of it. So basically just doing them all full blast all the time. Having 3 kids in 2 years, in 2007 through early 2009, obviously puts, a change into that. But it didn't stop me from doing any of them. So what I'm driving at is that my coming down for a landing in academia was its own story. And it had a lot to do with the changes at that university in the very things that had attracted me to it. As we like to say, the new administration at DePaul in 2007 wanted to become Northwestern University in the worst way. And that's exactly how they went about it, was in the worst way.
That's funny.
So it was particularly bad. The impact on our programs, the impact on the undergraduates, the demographics of the incoming undergraduates, all the black men in my classes disappeared. Poof, just gone. Like within 2 years.
God, that's crazy.
Right? And just as an example. And I, as I said, got involved in some pretty heavy politics. I became the faculty advisor for Students for Justice in Palestine, which, as you can imagine, was its own world.
I'm sure.
And so, therefore, I was very busy in that. But my point is that I was finding that the school, bit by bit by bit, was becoming a place where I could not honestly say to myself that we were serving the students who came to us. And it particularly kicked in after the financial crash. And at that point, I was saying, you guys have changed it up so that now the students are having to go into debt here, just like at all the other schools. They didn't used to have to do that. And now, after this crash, you're going to be trying to maintain the old model of hardcore student debt, extractive debt that they can't declare bankruptcy on or anything, and you're going to support this? And that's when I had always prided myself on being able to advise our students as they got ready to leave well, in terms of not just sort of being shoved out the door and looking around, but having a good professional basis for making choices about what they wanted to do. And I could no longer do that. I asked around all the places, and I was like, okay, and they said, we can't take undergraduates anymore. We can't take the new graduates. We just can't do it. And I realized that I could not look myself in the eye and say, what you do is a good thing to do. I was not well paid. You may not know this, but university professors, when they talk about like their pay scale and stuff, they're talking about 10 to 20% of the professors. This is crude and unwelcome to say. I know that people aren't supposed to talk about this, but after 25 years in academia and having been regarded as, if not the finest, one of the few finest teachers in the entire institution, and considered to, begged to stay when I said that I wanted to leave, begged to stay, that I made $50,000 a year.
That's crazy.
Now, that's actually, and I was no adjunct. I was a professor. Okay. So it's a big deal. I mean, people, and I was considered, oh shit, I'm here. Wanted to know if I was still in the session. I just got a notification that almost booted me. But anyway, the point was that I was not in a situation with 3 tiny children to take this seriously as a job. You can do good work that you respect and are proud of, and you can get respect for it by others and the people you work with around you and be treated decently by them, and you can be well paid. I'm of the opinion that most people will accept 2 of those.
Right.
And I had accepted the first 2 for crap pay. And what I was beginning to find was that these were faltering.
Yeah, the
good
2
work
pillars that you did
was collapsing, and the respect I was getting for it, now that it wasn't administratively supported, I was starting to cause trouble almost daily. I'd just go into the dean's office or the student's, academic affairs office or whatever and say, what the hell do you think you're doing? Give that student credit. She was in my class every single day. She did all the work. Well, she didn't get her papers. I don't care. Right. And so pretty soon I was starting to be a problem for my department head. Right. So with this sort of thing going on, I said, I have to stop. I landed in 2013. I landed a book contract with Oxford University Press for my dream book. I had proposed it to them 2 years earlier, and I got the contract. And so I got the contract, and I informed my department head that I am leaving next year. And I said, I shall finish this book. I shall have it published by Oxford University Press. I will call it a win. I was a professor for more than twice as long as I was a graduate student. Win. Fucking win. Okay? Win. Book published. Win. So that's what I did. And that book was published in a due time. It's called The Edge of Evolution, and concerns humanity, evolutionary theory, and the island of Dr. Moreau. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So still available from Oxford University Press. I think maybe somebody who's not one of my friends has bought it. I don't know. But anyway, but I did that. So that's the story of finishing out in academia. And as far as moving to Sweden was concerned, it's something that my wife and I had talked about for years and years. Our kids were born in 2007 and 2009, and we pretty much knew that we would have to go. And the alignment, like I was really super ready and she wasn't quite ready. Then she'd be super ready and something was going really well for me. And, so we were kind of doing that for a while. And then in, around 2015, 16, we looked at each other and we were like, bell pull, pull the cord.
Yeah.
So that's how that worked out. Now, as far as continuing to work here in Sweden is concerned, I just didn't want to be a prof anymore. And I said, what do I do that I'm any good at all? And let's start a business. Let's call it Adept Play. So that's my business here in Sweden.
And what is that business, Ron?
It is nothing more than a website and the associated necessary social media, a Discord channel, for example. But the idea is to showcase what it is to play by sharing it with one another. It's not about having to record one sessions, although if you do, bonus, but to talk, it's the old actual play form at the Forge. Come, share what you did, share who you are. I'm not talking about breaking anonymity. You can call yourself whatever you want. But the point is that, share who you are and how this is, what happens, how the game works for you, and we will have plenty to discuss. And that's basically what a person can do there. There is a section for consulting. I had started a few years earlier consulting for game design. Found that I really liked doing it and that I felt I was being reasonably effective. So now you can get consulting from me, as usual, really, really, really cheap because I have no head for business at all.
You're not good at this, Ron.
No, I'm not. I'm really not. And but the idea being that, I'd really rather have people benefit, if that makes any sense. I mean, I hope it's, and if they don't benefit, I don't want them to lose their shirts. So, which only makes sense, except that no one ever, you're not supposed to do that. Read a self-help book, right? You're not supposed to do that. So anyway, I'm doing that. And then I also am teaching classes at the moment in an Italian academy called Giano Academy. I'm teaching a couple classes on game design. A new round starts up in just 2.5 weeks. So, which I recommend. Anybody can go. It's just like an online thing. You can go.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it's taught in English. So, Giano Academy. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, please. We'll put it in the show notes.
I was really afraid of teaching these classes. I thought it was going to be like old man shouts at clouds while captive students, have to sit there glumly, And so I was really worried about promoting these and getting into them. But now that we've been through a couple of rounds of the Introduction to Design course and actually started to do some of the secondary courses that I've made, I'm like, oh my God, okay. It doesn't suck.
That's funny.
They're getting somewhere. This is great. They're learning.
Well, it's a new field. Right. This came up when I talked to Luke Crane, and Luke has been working through that as well, and teaching.
Here is an important thing for me about it. I tell the students that I have no fairy dust, that there is no textbook of role-playing game design, and that I am not in any way, shape, or form going to discuss writing your game and publishing your game. We are talking about design,
right.
Period. And a lot of what we do and what you write down will never show up in the book. And I encourage you, once you really feel like your design is mature or maturing, then start all over and write the game. Don't write the game now, or, you can scribble, but it's shit. Don't do it, right? It's not important. So that's a big deal, is that we work with design as such with no plans. That's your problem later down the road. Future you has that problem. So that's a big deal for what I teach about design. And it's all through playing that's how cool. to play so that your design gets better. So that's a big deal. Let me think other things that happen at Adept Play, which have been kind of important to me. First of all, I've been promoting internationalism from the start. I want this to be a multilingual place, and I want games that are played in very different places around the earth to be showcased there. it's not proprietary. I mean, if you have your own YouTube channel or whatever, your own place where you do this, put up a post here too. It's just boosting your signal. So it's not intended. I mean, there's no monetary fee to sign up. Aside from consulting and getting paid for teaching or stuff like that, and the sales of my PDFs, then the only other way I get paid is by people being on a Patreon, which is obviously voluntary. So, and there's no Adapt Play, there's no paywall for anything there. So as you can see, it's my usual anarchic, thickness that is at work here. But I'm kind of
but it sounds
hoping
like you sound like you're at peace with that, though, Ron. I mean, you joke about it, but it sounds like that's where you're at your happiest.
I am. Okay. I am happy doing that, and I am blunt about it because nobody will believe it. And so I have to be very blunt with people about what I will and won't do or what I want them to participate with. So otherwise they say, yeah, but we can do this, right? So that's a big piece of it. But anyway, so Adapt Play, the idea is there's a lot of things calling themselves actual play out there with no attribution. Thank you very much. And
I'm guilty. I'm doing that.
And they, you're doing a great thing. What you're doing is the good thing. Because what the bad thing is, that's very judgmental. Let us say the thing that I don't want to do and do not regard as constructive is to have professional entertainers effectively play the parts of fictional role players who themselves are playing a fictionalized account of playing a role-playing game. And it's very entertaining because that's what these people are good at. And even if they're improving, they are skilled improvers at catching the ball and flicking it back to the audience making a big laugh out of hearing that thing again, and they're good at that. Improv is an entertainment transitive activity. And so when you have that being the way that a lot of people are encountering this word role-playing, here is my characteristically crude analogy. You're basically trying to show people sex by having them being entertained by porn.
Interesting.
The analogy, I think, is exact. So, therefore, I am very much in favor of promoting anybody who is enjoying this activity and showcasing that enjoyment so that people, in part, one is that people who may be interested can actually see what you do, what it is to enjoy this. And another interesting piece of this is, well, am I trying to grow the hobby, make the hobby bigger? The answer is no. In my experience, people who self-identify as gamers and role players, only a certain fraction of people are genuinely aesthetically interested in anything that they're doing. A lot of it is just commercial capture. This is the way they spend money to be involved in pop culture. And that's fine. Every endeavor has perhaps a majority membership in that category. So that's fine, but that's not who I want to play with. So I look for people in role playing who have, and do it. Does that mean it's all serious? No, we're talking about the fun. Okay.
Right.
So then I maintain, and I have seen it in practice constantly, is that similarly, the larger culture has a minority fraction of people who would like to play and have at this point pricked up their ears at least once and said, oh yeah, I would like to do that sometime. So I'm not even talking about like an untapped and unknown. I'm talking about the people who are like, yeah, I heard about that. And there's a lot of people like that. And they don't look or act like the subculture of gamer.
No,
right?
It's very true.
And you'll even see them at gaming tables sometime. They're often like the romantic partner of one of the people who's there. And they will say that they're just there, just to, be in with this crew. It's fun. I'm with them, I'm with her, I'm with him, whatever. But they're the best at the table. And so what I'm talking about is that therefore that subsector within the hobby and that subsector outside of the hobby, I consider the same people. And these are my audience. And then there's another interesting batch, which I don't seek, but happens. People who have, in fact, decided that they hate role-playing and hate the hobby.
Okay.
And then after a bit of interaction, and then they're jumping into a game, and we're finding it at its play, there's like a whole subset of the community there who are basically like, this was super fun.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I'm trying to do, is to generate my live group. There's the infrastructure for this in Sweden is amazing. I won't even go into it. It's amazing. The coronavirus put a huge dent in what I was doing with the live meetings that I was doing at least once a week. But we've continued by screen. But that makes it a lot harder to see, because we had a steady rotation in of new people. And that makes that a lot harder. We're still doing that, but it's slow. So the idea is to have a community here and to also be connecting with different people. So if anyone listening, if you like what we're doing and talking about at Adepts Play, because a lot of chit chat you know what it is? It's a stealth form. A post is a post. You like say, oh, we played Star Trek and we played this game, right? This game. And then you make a post, and then people can comment, and then there's one level of nesting. So then under a comment, there can be a string of replies. So it looks like a blog, but it's actually a forum. Don't shh. Right? It's in that fashion. It's very informal, and it's so slow. There's no likes, no social media interaction whatsoever, no messaging to one another. There's nothing like that. And it's so slow. I mean, there are people who have tried it and they don't like it. They want 50 comments, in the first hour. They're used to that. They get that on their YouTube channel. They get that at Twitter. Here, wait a couple of days, a comment will appear. Someone else will chat about that, and that's funny. This guy's not answering. We're talking about his game. That's because we took the time to watch. It's because we took the time to think. So but if a person can stand that it simply isn't playing that game, then I think the benefit, and also there is also the Discord. You can go and pop off at the Discord channel.
You can get your immediate gratification there.
You can go there and hit, the little kitty cat button or the little heart hug button and all that. You can do that there. And that's fine. But it's,
you jumped the shark, Ron. I don't know if you're serious anymore now.
Well,
that's great.
As Discord channels go, I have sort of, miffed one or another person. I was like, all right, cut this shit. And they're like, wait, what? No, yeah, I'm moderating you. Can you just, you're bullshitting us now. Stop. And they're like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, go tweet. So, it's kind of, even for a Discord channel, it is just a little bit, it's very simple, very few channels. There's not 50 channels of subdivisions. So that is there. There's the Patreon as well. I am crap at Patreon because actually I do better than a lot of people. Actually, I've got, a solid little group there, but it's not, it's not like thousands of people.
Sure.
But what I'm driving at, though, is that I've been struggling for years to how to do this. I don't do the kind of thing where I can give you a picture every week. But I'm going to try to have to come up with something where it is. It's really not fair. Patron people kind of want that. And if I want new people, I'm probably going to have to come up with something of that kind. So still work in progress as far as that's concerned.
I'm in the same way, Ron. I've got a Patreon, and there is no added benefit to being a patron of me. Other than you get an episode without ads. That's the only thing that you get.
In mine, you'll get like a lot of playtesting chit chat, and you'll get, for whatever it's worth, my periodic chunk of what I've been reading, which is kind of fun, actually. And a few other things. Like I'll bring up a juicy topic because I'm suffering. I want a chaotic and opinionated benefit from privacy discussion on this stuff where we could be wrong, like really wrong. And I'm okay with being wrong in public, but in this case, I'm pretty sure we're going to be really wrong. And so that's going to be, let's hash it out here, and then we'll bring it up, to
the bigger group.
I have a section I call seminar, which is where we do, this is going to be linked at seminar, for example, where topics are brought up and discussed. The biggest part of those are what's called labs, where we have, and patrons can be in the labs. So you can be in the labs and discuss really cool, important things.
That's cool. That's very, very cool.
So that's the idea.
As we wrap up, Ron, one thing I'd be curious about for you, and you may not have an answer to this, are there any games out there right now that get you excited? Is there anything, like, what does Ron play?
Well, you see, this is one of those interesting industry questions, you see. And I don't answer industry questions because I don't follow what's out latest and what's the hottest and the new.
Well, that's not what I'm looking about.
Okay, that's good. That's good, because that's not what
I want to know what Ron plays.
Oh, no problem at all.
Because of our connection with Anthony, I know you recently played the Modiphius Star Trek.
Right. So in just this year alone, I currently am playing Dialect, facilitated by someone else in the Swedish group. I am playing Epiphany, a game by Greg Porter that was published in 1994. And I just finished a very extensive game of the latest version of Gamma World using the D&D 4th edition rules. And then before that, we played a game called Chaotic, also coincidentally from 1994, a science fiction game. It goes on. I have a very extensive list. If you go to the Adept Play of the actual play section of Adept Play and just look at what I've posted or what people have posted in games that I happen to be in, the list is enormous. And to tell you, and frankly, I've been playing until recently, I played in a very long running game of Empire of the Petal Throne, original publication of 1975. So I play games from every single era of role-playing. I enjoy them a lot. So you will find and other people are doing the same. A lot of people who came to Adept Play saying, it's Ron Edwards, we're going to be the new indie hotness, the new innovative this and that. And I'm like, yeah, let's play this game from, 1982.
And we're not going to change anything about it.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to play in good faith. And sometimes, this is important too. Rules as written as a principle, that's not where I'm at. I'm interested in incorporating what they're offering, but then there are some where you do try it and play, and you are like, balls. Okay, that part we're not doing. Right? That happens. Okay, so it's not about purism toward the rules. It's more like, we're going to take of it as much as we possibly can in good faith. But we don't even have to do that. That's not like moral. So but the idea is that, I'm not even sure where to start. Okay, first of all, I played a shit ton of my version of Champions all the way through earliest playtest until publication over the course of 2 years. So you want to talk about Champions now, there's a ton of Champions now on there. Now, all by other people than me, which is good. And then the same thing goes for Sorcerer. I started off deliberately focusing on Sorcerer, and then I stepped away from it. Now a ton of other people are playing it, which is great. And then, let's see, last year, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and... oh my goodness, it just goes on. I've played. The reason I'm looking is I'm kind of looking over at the shelf. games, obscure and games well known. I'm very open to what other people want to play. So a lot of the time, like the Gamma World game and stuff like that, those are games that other people have proposed that I've jumped in on. So I am playing tons of games, some because I love them, some because, and this is a big thing for me, a game that's been sitting on my shelf that's always been third place or fifth place of what to play. And finally you're like, I can't do this anymore. It's got to be in first place. I am playing this. One game that I really, really loved playing is called Dark Earth Legends, also from the early 90s, basically a failed fantasy game, what I call a fantasy heartbreaker, because it was published and designed at the table in great faith with a certain sort of this is what fantasy is from role-playing. And it ran economically face first into the 90s and died a horrible death. But a lot of them are cringy in their assumptions, but amazing in many aspects of play.
That's cool.
And I always knew Dark Earth Legends had a little special something. And that I really wanted to play it. It was always sort of the top of my list, but nobody else chose it when I said, hey, let's pick 5 of these. No one ever chose it. So anyway, I finally got to play that, which was great. There's another game that's very similar called Legendary Lives, which actually I had played a while ago and continued to do on and off as people were interested in it. And it's an extraordinarily fascinating game. One of the things that we've found is that a lot of these fantasy heartbreakers, so-called by me in my essays, you learn a lot. And although I do speak reasonably highly of, the OSR as a creative, kind of ferment, I will say that I don't learn a whole lot from many of them, which is kind of too bad. I mean, I kind of wish they would be a little more aggressive in their aesthetics. It can't all be in the art, all right? And in a lot of them, it tends to be. So if I could actually do what that guy is doing on the cover, I mean, how many role-playing games do you have where the guy's doing the guy and the gal are like awesome on the cover, and then you play a while and you're like, wait a minute, I don't get to be that guy,
cover.
Right? And so, there's a lot of that going on. But these games, a lot of these older games that came to wretched and tragic ends economically, they will blow your mind.
That's cool.
I mean, you will learn stuff about, so this game handles this kind of interaction differently. And it's not made by committee. It's made off of a table. It's made from experience, and it shows.
Oh, that's
Legendary
cool.
Lives taught more people more things through a variety of different groups playing it, like with and without me, than I think I've learned from a role-playing game ever. It really, and it's got all sorts of quirks. It's got a terrible statistical problem in its resolution, but we were able to figure it out. That's the point. We were able to say, why does that problem happen? And we learned about it. So we then built its variables compared to the universal table in Marvel Superheroes that it's derived from, and saw the way the color bands were different, right? And then we said, yes, that's what it's like. That's why that happens in play. So, you can really get somewhere. And the positive aspects of it are shocking. It's just to tell you a little bit more about it, it has what to a number of people is very much a red flag. It's got several dozen races and several dozen professions or types, right? And you're like, oh no, right? And it's got this long list of these things that look like skills, and to a lot of people, it might be, oh no, and heavy, complicated outcomes of rolling. You roll and then you check and then you go over. Right? So, but its character creation system is almost entirely random. You will roll upwards of 30 times, table after table after table after table. You will go through this and you are rolling stuff that is more and more and more and more nuanced, then only at specific points do you choose something. And not the first thing either. And one of the things you choose after the race and after the characteristics and after the background and what their height and weight are and their family skills are and all sorts of things, only then do you then look at your attributes and get an idea of what types you're allowed to pick. And types are not in the fiction. Your character's profession is whatever you want it to be. And it may well be the one from your family, or it may not. But that's what your character's doing. Your type is the kind of person they are. And they do have names like knight and priest and thief. And who knows? There's a whole bunch. But do you see what I mean? That's your story role. That's what your character is good at. That's the kind of thing, that's how people are going to treat you or think of you. But it's not anything you call yourself.
Interesting.
So, but you choose that. And you'll have a limited number, usually about 4 or 5, based on where your attributes have come to. And so then you roll, and you roll all this background stuff. You roll relative to your religion. You got this huge thing about the religion, but then it tells you whether you're fucked up regarding your religion. Are they hunting you or not? And at some point in this, a weird snap together happens. And every new roll actually makes amazing sense. Something cognitive happens along the way. Notice that you've participated once.
Right.
And after that, the further rolls start to seem divinely inspired. The dice must have known, right? and it's like, oh, of course, right? And you're doing that. And then at the end, you name your character's current goals. Absolutely unconstructed. But you know that this priest guy whose girlfriend was in love with his friend who got struck by lightning in that adventure that went badly, and now he has to get this artifact, away from the rebel faction of his religion, and he owes this much money to save his family, and it's crazy. But it's yours, and the choices you made in it make the whole thing yours. No one's character is going to be like yours, even with the same roles.
That's cool. And then you tie the bow at the end, it sounds like.
And so it's actually, it's shocking. I mean, all of us were kind of like, give me more games with random character creation now.
Yeah.
So you see what I mean about learning stuff?
I do. And I tell you what's funny is how random tables, and we could do a whole freaking episode on this, but how they've come from the very beginning.
Oh yeah.
Wicked went out of fashion from my understanding, very much went out of fashion. And it's been interesting to hear how they've come back, but I'm learning they didn't come back in the same way they left, right? That they're much smarter now and they're used differently and they mean different things now. And that's been fascinating to me.
Yeah. The terms that I've been developing, because I've sort of said, look, I learned from all the terminology that we worked through the Forge, but that was all heuristic and it was a small community. And the goal was not to create a vocabulary for the ages. I never wrote the Book of Forge Theory for a reason. Now I said, okay, now that we've done all that, now how do we talk about it in ordinary language, for which we really don't need that many special terms. But one of those terms that I alluded to a minute ago was bounce. The things that occur that no one person had full control over in terms of introducing. And if somebody, or all of us, or something in between, are kind of on the back foot. Our choices have to change. One might say, oh, you're just talking about randomization. No, I'm not. There's a lot of random methods that don't have bounce. And there's a lot of non-random things you can do that do. It's just that if a well-constructed dice or other random system is gold for it. So does that give you an idea of the kind of talking we're doing, right?
Oh, I absolutely love it, Ron.
Yeah. staying real grounded as much as we can. So
that's great, Ron. Goal. That's great. I appreciate it, my friend. I appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us. So obviously we've got some things to link in there, but let's talk quickly about people who want more Ron. Where do they go?
Oh man. Okay. adeptplay.com. So that's one word, adeptplay.com. And there's the link to the Discord channel. If that's your thing, right? You can just go, website, Discord chunk, right? Go ahead. That's one thing. And other than that, well, I'll put all my stuff on YouTube. So I willy-nilly have a YouTube channel. But I don't really cultivate a community there because I'd rather have it be at Adepts Play. But some people do, like to comment there, and I will be friendly there. I will talk with a person there if they want. So you can hit my YouTube channel. Very typically, you're going to see a pattern. Everything I do, there's like 2 options. It's not, it's not curated through a whole ton of complicated things. Well, so that's the YouTube. And then, of course, the Patreon, which is also linked at Adepts Play for those as would care to contribute to this being possible. But adeptplay.com is the place where things are available to check out. My original goal was to have it be very archival, that you could go somewhere and you could say, oh, here they talk about system. Let's click on that. And wham, all these different posts would pop up about where, different things. You can go and check these things out. Or you could say, oh, does anyone play D&D around here? Click, bam. Oh, look, all the D&D play, of which there is plenty, I might add, of all the flavors. And so if you were to go there and look for something like that, you won't find it because website design ain't easy. And so it's kind of a lost art, actually, in some ways. So therefore, I am struggling to have the site, be easy, but really you'll just have to go to Adepts Play Actual Play for all the actual play stuff, Seminar for all the chit-chat stuff. Of course, a lot of that happens in the comments, too, of anything. And then consulting, you can actually see a lot of the clients allow me to present the consulting. And that's actually pretty illuminating stuff sometimes. There's some pretty fascinating things. I'm very big in consulting about not telling people what to do. I want to help them be in the position that they decide. And so you'll see a lot of that in a wide variety of different games. So I would say that's where I'm at, and there's no lock on the door.
I love that. I love that.
But again, I have to say, just like the old Forge, it's not the internet. It's not the old, just like the Forge wasn't the old internet. This isn't the new internet. Like there's no like buttons. You're not going to, click on it again an hour later and it'll all be different. That's not going to be the case.
Well, there's a lot of places that have that, Ron, right? So it's exactly. Not like that demand is not being fed. Exactly. Well, again, Ron, thank you so much. I'm sure I'm going to come up with another excuse to talk you into coming on again. And for those of you that...
Thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure. And for those of you that stuck around to the end, thanks for listening. Take care.
Enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to Tabletop Talk and share it with your friends. Check out our content on YouTube and Twitch. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook and stay updated on everything coming from Third Floor. All the links are in the show notes. Take care, floorheads.
You still here? Wow. Well, the episode is over, but if you're bored, why not go to patreon.com and support the show for as little as $1 a month? Yeah, you can just scroll down and get the link. It's Patreon that makes this and all of our other content possible. Don't you want to join the other floorheads on the Patreon Discord? Anyway, thanks for sticking around. Take care. Bye.